The fluorescent lights in Kemper's hardware cast everything in that sickly blue-white glow that makes even healthy skin look corpse pale. I stood there with a crowbar in my hand, the metal cold against my palm, feeling Iris Kemper's eyes on me. She'd been kind these past weeks, fed me coffee, let me run a tab. But kindness has limits when money gets tight and neighbors start whispering. Her mouth opened, words coming out slow like she'd practiced them. "I can't keep giving you credit, hun. People are talking." My throat tightened. "I just need 3 more days. The court date is—" The bell above the door chimed. Heavy footsteps. A voice I'd learned to hate in the span of 2 conversations cut through the stale air. "The court date won't matter, Miss Brooks. You have no proof." Victor Langford. Black SUV parked outside like a hearse. Vest that cost more than everything I owned. Eyes that calculated property values while looking at you. Everything froze. The crowbar felt heavier. Iris looked away. Victor smiled that shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. But let me back up. 3 weeks ago, I had $337 and nowhere to go. Now I'm fighting for a ranch I never knew existed. This is how it started. The bulb in Mr. Perkins' office flickered twice before dying completely, leaving us in gray light from dusty blinds. 19 years at Pinewood Girls' Home, and this was how it ended. A cardboard box, a folder of documents, a handshake from a man who'd watched too many kids like me walk out that door into nothing. I turned 19 2 weeks ago. The state was officially done with me. They didn't care that I had no family waiting outside, no college acceptance letters, no plan beyond hoping the warehouse downtown might hire me. Mr. Perkins pushed the folder across his metal desk, the scraping sound too loud in the quiet. "These are your official documents, Maya." Birth certificate, medical history, educational records, everything the state has on file. I already knew what was in there. What wasn't? I've been left outside a police station when I was maybe 2 days old, wrapped in a blue towel. No note, no name, nothing. Just a screaming infant nobody wanted. The cops gave me the last name Brooks because I was found on River Street. Real creative. I'd spent countless nights as a child imagining who my parents might be. Maybe my mother was a teenager with no choice. Maybe my father was a soldier who never knew I existed. Maybe they were both dead in some tragic accident. The stories I invented were always better than the truth, which was that I simply didn't know. I was a question mark wrapped in a blue towel, and the answer had been missing my entire life. I flipped through the folder anyway because sitting in silence felt worse. Standard forms, shot records, report cards documenting my thoroughly average journey through the system. I'd never been a standout kid. Not smart enough for scholarships, not troubled enough for special attention. Not cute enough to get adopted when I was little and still had a chance. Then I saw it, tucked in the back pocket of the folder. A manila envelope sealed shut, my name written across the front in faded blue ink. What is this? Mr. Perkins squinted at it through his reading glasses. There's a notation on the back. Says it was to be given to you upon departure from state care. Must have been filed with your intake paperwork in 2005 and never processed properly. You know how disorganized things were back then. 19 years. This envelope had been sitting in my file for 19 years. Nobody had bothered to check. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook, and something small and metallic that clinked when the envelope shifted. The handwriting was messy, rushed, like someone had written it in a hurry or under stress. From Maya, when she is old enough. I couldn't keep you, but I made sure you'd have something. The ranch is yours if you want it. Deeded under your birth name, Maya Grace Carter. Property taxes paid through a trust fund. Key to the gate is enclosed. 40 miles north of Clearwater, Montana. Old Carter Ranch Road. Nobody wanted it after Mama died, but maybe you will. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. Your father, Daniel. I read it 3 times. A ranch. He'd left me a ranch. And a name. Maya Grace Carter. That was my real name, not the one the state had given me. For 19 years I'd been Maya Brooks, a name invented by strangers. But I had a real name, a name that belonged to me, a name that connected me to someone. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the key, old brass attached to a cracked leather keychain stamped with the words, Carter Ranch. The metal was worn smooth in places from years of use. Someone had held this key thousands of times. Someone had unlocked a gate with it, walked through, come home. And now it was mine. That night, I lay awake in the narrow bed I'd slept in since I was 8, staring at water-stained ceiling tiles and listening to the sounds of the nearly empty dormitory. Most of the other girls had already left, scattered to relatives or halfway houses or the streets. The building felt like a tomb. I held the key up to the moonlight coming through the barred window, studying every scratch and worn edge. Carter Ranch, 40 miles north of Clearwater, Montana. I'd never heard of either place, but suddenly they represented something I'd never had before. A connection. Proof that I'd come from somewhere, that someone had thought about me, even if they hadn't stuck around. The next morning, I packed my entire life into a duffel bag and a backpack. 4 changes of clothes, toiletries, the blue towel I'd been found in because throwing it away felt like erasing evidence, the folder of documents, and the key. I had $337 saved from working in the home's kitchen over the past 2 years. Money I'd planned to use for a security deposit on some basement apartment. Now I had a different destination. The Greyhound station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. The woman behind the counter barely looked up when I approached, chewing gum with her mouth open. How much for a ticket to Clearwater, Montana? She typed on her keyboard, not meeting my eyes. One way, $67. I counted out the bills carefully, watching my savings shrink. $67 was almost a fifth of everything I had. But what was the alternative? Stay in this city where nobody knew me, nobody cared about me, and work at a warehouse until I died? Yeah, one way. The bus didn't leave until noon. I found a seat in the corner and waited. I watched people come and go. Families reuniting, couples saying goodbye, businessmen on their phones. Everyone had somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. I'd always been the girl watching from the outside, wondering what it felt like to have that kind of connection. The ride took 11 hours, including 2 transfers and a 40-minute delay in some nowhere town where the driver had to wait for a replacement part. I spent most of the journey pressed against the window, watching the landscape transform from urban sprawl to endless stretches of brown grassland and distant mountains. Montana looked nothing like the city I'd grown up in. Everything here felt bigger, emptier, like the world had room to breathe. The few towns we passed through were small, just clusters of buildings hugging the highway before disappearing back into the vastness. I'd never seen so much open space in my life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and watched the shadows lengthen across the prairie. Somewhere out there was a ranch with my name on it. Somewhere out there was a piece of my history waiting to be discovered. The bus finally rolled into Clearwater just after 7 in the evening. The station was barely a station at all, just a covered bench outside a gas station with a faded Greyhound sign bolted to the wall. I stepped off with my bags, and the driver pulled away before I'd even gotten my bearings, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot as the sun dropped toward the horizon. Clearwater was small, maybe 3,000 people if I had to guess. Main Street stretched for about 6 blocks, lined with the kinds of businesses that had probably been there for decades. A hardware store, a diner called Thornton's Place, a feed store, a bank, a bar with neon signs in the windows. Pickup trucks parked diagonally along the curb. A few people walked along the sidewalks, most of them wearing jeans and work boots. Nobody gave me a second glance. I walked into Thornton's Place because I was starving, and because I figured someone there might know about Carter Ranch. The inside was warm and smelled like fried onions and coffee. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. A long counter ran along one side with stools that looked like they'd been sat on by generations of locals. The walls were covered with photographs, old newspaper clippings, hunting trophies. A clock shaped like a cowboy boot hung above the cash register. A man who must have been Hank, based on his name tag, looked up from wiping down the counter. Maybe 60 years old, with short gray hair and a face that had seen enough of life to not be surprised by much. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of someone who'd done hard work his whole life. "Grab a seat anywhere, hon. Be right with you." I slid into a booth near the back and set my bags on the seat beside me. A laminated menu was tucked between the napkin dispenser and the salt shaker, advertising burgers and breakfast served all day. My stomach growled just reading it. I hadn't eaten anything since a gas station sandwich that morning. Hank came over with a pot of coffee and a mug. "You passing through or looking for work?" He poured without waiting for an answer. "Neither, I think. I'm trying to find a place called Carter Ranch. It's supposed to be about 40 miles north of here." His hand paused mid-pour. Just for a second, but I noticed. When you grow up without parents, you learn to pay attention to the little signs that tell you what someone's really thinking. Carter Ranch. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a while. That old place has been sitting empty for, probably 15 years now. Ever since Eleanor Carter passed. "Why are you looking for it?" I pulled the key from my pocket and set it on the table. "I think it might have been left to me. By my father." Hank picked up the key, turning it over in his weathered hands. His expression softened, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been recognition. Eleanor Carter had a son named Daniel. He left town when he was about 25, got a girl pregnant, and took off before the baby came. Eleanor never spoke much about what happened. Broke her heart from what I heard. She worked that ranch alone for years after her husband Theodore died, just waiting, I think, hoping Daniel would come back. He handed the key back to me, and his voice dropped lower. He never did, though. Eleanor died about 15 years ago. Found her in the barn one morning. Died doing what she loved, I suppose. But it was a lonely way to go. Something heavy settled in my chest. My grandmother. I had a grandmother, and she died alone, waiting for someone who never came. She always talked about you, you know. Hank's voice was gentle now. Her granddaughter out there somewhere. She never stopped hoping you'd come home. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know this woman existed until yesterday, and she'd spent years thinking about me. Years hoping I would show up. "Do you know how to get there?" Hank nodded. "Take Highway 14 north for about 35 miles, then turn left on Old Carter Ranch Road. It's easy to miss, the sign's half fallen down. Follow that road for another 5 miles or so and you'll see the gate. Ranch is about a mile past that." He studied me for a moment, and I could see him putting the pieces together. The age, the eyes, the reason I was here. "You planning to go out there tonight? It'll be dark soon and that road's not maintained, easy to get lost." "Tomorrow morning." "Is there a motel in town?" "Clearwater Inn, 2 blocks down. Tell Dale at the desk that Hank sent you. He'll give you the weekly rate even for one night." He smiled slightly.
You look like you could use a break, kid. Order whatever you want.
First meals on the house. Anyone brave enough to chase down a ghost ranch deserves a decent dinner. I ordered a burger and fries. While I ate, a few locals trickled in. Hank must have said something because a couple of them glanced my way with curious but not unfriendly expressions. A woman in a worn flannel jacket stopped by my booth on her way out. Heard you might be Eleanor's granddaughter. Good woman, your grandmother. Stubborn as hell, but good. Hope you find what you're looking for out there. The motel room was small but clean, with a bed that didn't sag too much and a television that got 4 channels. I lay on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the popcorn ceiling. Tomorrow I would see the ranch. Tomorrow I would know if this was real or just another dead end. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I had a name that belonged to me. Maya Grace Carter, granddaughter of Eleanor Carter. It felt strange and fragile, like something I could break just by holding it too tightly. I woke up before dawn. Years of living in a dormitory where lights came on at 6:30 had trained my body to wake early. But this morning felt different. I wasn't waking up to chores or the noise of other girls getting ready for school. I was waking up with a destination, a purpose that was mine alone. I showered, packed my bags, and checked out of the motel by 7. Thornton's place didn't open until 8, so I grabbed a coffee and a pre-wrapped sandwich from the gas station and started walking north along Highway 14. I thought about asking someone for a ride, but something made me want to do this alone. To walk the distance and earn whatever I found at the end. The morning was cold, my breath visible in the air, but the sky was clear and endless. The highway was straight and empty, with scrubland stretching out on both sides. Occasionally, a pickup truck would pass, and once someone slowed down and asked if I needed a ride, but I waved them on. I walked for about an hour, my legs warming up, my mind wandering. I thought about all the times I'd wondered where I came from, all the nights I'd lain awake imagining different versions of my parents. I'd created dozens of stories over the years, each one more elaborate than the last. But I'd never imagined this. A ranch in Montana. A grandmother who'd worked the land alone. A father who'd run away. After about an hour of walking, a truck pulled up beside me and stopped. The window rolled down and I saw a woman with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands gripping the steering wheel. Laugh lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Everything about her said rancher, from her worn boots to the hay stuck to her jacket. "You're not seriously planning to walk 40 miles, are you?" I shrugged. Didn't have a better plan. She laughed, shaking her head. "Get in. I'm heading up that way anyway to check on my fence line. Name's Marlene Blackwood. I ranch about 10 miles from where Carter Ranch used to be." I climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the warmth. The truck smelled like leather and coffee and something earthy. We drove in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke again. "Your grandmother was a good neighbor. Helped me out more than once when I was just starting out and didn't know a damn thing about cattle. She was quiet, kept to herself mostly. But if you needed help, she was there. Never asked for anything in return. That was just who she was." "What happened to the ranch?" Marlene glanced at me. "Life, I guess. Theodore, Eleanor's husband, died of cancer back in '92. After that, it was just her and Daniel. They didn't get along so well after a while. Daniel wanted out of this town, wanted something bigger. He left right after he turned 25. Eleanor took it hard, threw herself into the work. But ranching alone is brutal. She got older, things started falling apart, and eventually her heart gave out. Found her in the barn one morning. Died doing what she loved, I suppose. Her voice caught slightly on those last words, I used to check on her every week, bring her groceries, make sure she was doing okay. She always talked about you, you know. Her granddaughter out there somewhere. She never stopped hoping you'd come home. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't known this woman existed until yesterday, and she'd spent years thinking about me. We turned onto Old Carter Ranch Road, which was barely more than 2 dirt tracks with grass growing down the middle. The truck bounced over ruts and washboard, and I had to grip the door handle to keep from hitting my head on the roof. After about 5 miles, we came to a gate made of weathered wood and rusted wire. A sign hung crooked from the top rail, the words barely visible under years of weather damage. Carter Ranch. Marlene put the truck in park. This is as far as I go. Ranch house is about a mile down this road. You sure you want to do this? I nodded, grabbing my bags from the back seat. Yeah, I need to see it. She reached into the glove box and pulled out a business card. My number's on there. Cell service is spotty out here, but it works sometimes. And Maya, don't get your hopes up too high, okay? The place has been empty a long time. She looked at me for exactly 3 seconds, not saying anything, but her eyes said what her mouth didn't. You're stronger than you think. I thanked her and watched her truck disappear back down the road, leaving me alone at the gate. I pulled out the brass key, but the gate wasn't locked, just held closed by a loop of wire. I unwound it and pushed the gate open, the hinges screaming in protest. Then I shouldered my bags and started walking. The road wound through overgrown pastures, where sagebrush and wild grass had reclaimed the land. I could see the remnants of old fence posts, some still standing, others collapsed into the dirt. In the distance, mountains rose up, their peaks still white with snow. The air smelled like sage and dust and something else, something wild that the city never had. I breathed it in deep, filling my lungs with this new place. After about 20 minutes, I crested a small rise, and there it was. The ranch house sat in a shallow valley, a single-story structure with faded white siding and a sagging front porch. To the left was a barn, its red paint almost entirely gone, exposing gray wood underneath. There were a few smaller outbuildings, all in various states of decay, and what looked like the remains of a corral, the posts still standing, but the rails mostly gone. It wasn't much. Honestly, it looked like the kind of place you'd see in a documentary about ghost towns. But as I stood there, looking down at it, something shifted in my chest. This place had been waiting for me. My grandmother had lived here, worked here, died here. She'd looked at these same mountains every morning, watched the same sunset every evening. And somehow, across all those years and all that distance, she'd found a way to reach out and bring me home. I walked down the slope toward the house, my boots crunching on gravel. The porch steps creaked dangerously under my weight, and I made a mental note to avoid the third one entirely. The front door had a deadbolt, and this time the brass key fit perfectly. The lock was stiff, and I had to work it back and forth, but eventually it turned with a heavy click. The door swung inward, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled like dust and old wood and abandonment. I stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the sunlight filtering through dirty windows. Dust covered every surface in a thick layer, and cobwebs hung from the corners like tattered curtains. But underneath the neglect, I could see the structure of a home. The bones were solid, the walls straight, the floors still level despite years of abandonment. There was a living room with a stone fireplace, a couch and 2 chairs still positioned around it like people might sit down at any moment. A handmade quilt was draped over the back of the couch, faded but still beautiful, its pattern of interlocking stars speaking to hours of careful work.
The kitchen had wooden cabinets and an old gas stove. Through a doorway, I could see a dining table with 4 chairs. I walked through slowly, my footsteps leaving tracks in the dust. Every step felt like stepping back in time. This had been someone's life, someone's world. The dishes were still in the cabinets. A calendar on the wall was frozen in August 2009.
A pair of reading glasses sat on the kitchen counter next to a folded newspaper, as if someone had just set them down and walked away. There were 3 bedrooms down a short hallway. The first was small, with just a single bed frame and an empty dresser. The second was larger, clearly the master bedroom, with a bigger bed and a closet with the door hanging off its hinges. A wedding photograph hung on the wall, showing a young couple standing in front of a church. The woman in a simple white dress, the man in his Sunday best. Eleanor and Theodore, my grandparents. But it was the 3rd bedroom that made me stop. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings, magazine cutouts, and photographs, all yellowed with age. I stepped closer, examining them. Most of the clippings were about ranching, cattle prices, rodeo results, high school sports scores. But scattered among them were photographs. Pictures of a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on a horse with a huge grin on his face. The same boy, a few years older, holding a blue ribbon at what looked like a county fair. And then, tucked in the corner, a photograph that made my heart stop. A young man, barely out of his teens, holding a baby wrapped in a blue towel. I recognized that towel. I had kept it for 19 years, carried it with me from foster home to foster home, slept with it under my pillow as a child. It was the only thing I had from my birth, the only physical connection to wherever I'd come from. I pulled the photograph off the wall carefully. Written on the back in faded pencil were the words, "Daniel and Maya, 3 weeks old. My father and me." He'd held me. He'd kept a photograph of us together. I'd never seen a picture of him before, never known what he looked like. But here he was, young and scared, and holding me like maybe he didn't want to let go. His eyes were dark, his hair messy, his face soft, with an expression I couldn't quite name. Wonder, maybe. Or fear. Or love. Perhaps all 3. Then photos of Daniel as a baby, as a toddler, growing up in this house. But there was something else at the bottom of the trunk. A large leather journal, its cover cracked and worn from years of handling. I lifted it out carefully and opened it to the first page. Eleanor Carter's Ranch Journal, started January 1978. I flipped through the pages, which were filled with entries about weather patterns, cattle sales, equipment repairs, and the daily rhythms of ranch life. But scattered throughout were more personal entries, and those were what caught my attention. June 15th, 1992. Theodore's cancer is back. Doctors say 6 months, maybe less. Don't know how to tell Daniel. He's only 12. Still needs his father. Don't know how to be enough for him on my own. March 3rd, 1993. Theodore passed this morning. Held his hand until the end. Daniel won't come out of his room. I don't have the words to make this better. How do you explain to a child that the world just got smaller, darker, emptier? I turned more pages, watching years pass in brief entries. October 22nd, 2004. Daniel has been distant all year, working at the feed store in town. But something's wrong. He won't talk to me. I see so much of Theodore in him. That same stubborn silence when things are hard. I wish I knew how to reach him. May 8th, 2005. Daniel came home tonight, white as a sheet. Says he got a girl pregnant. Some girl passing through town, already gone. She left the baby at a police station in the city. Wouldn't keep it. Wouldn't tell him where. He's devastated. I've never seen him cry like this. Not since Theodore died. He keeps saying he has to find her, find the baby. I told him we'd figure it out together. He didn't believe me. My hands trembled as I read. The baby. That was me. I'd been born and left at a police station, and my father had known. He hadn't just abandoned me, he'd been devastated. July 30th, 2005. Daniel left last night. Took some clothes and the truck and just disappeared. Left a note saying he couldn't stay here. Couldn't face what he'd done. He's not wrong to feel guilty, but running won't fix anything. I tried to call him, but his phone is disconnected. I don't know where he went. September 19th, 2005. Got a call from a social worker in the city. Daniel's baby is a girl. They named her Maya. She's in the foster system. I asked if I could take her, raise her here. They said I'm too old. That a 73-year-old woman living alone on a failing ranch is not a suitable guardian. I begged them. I told them I'd do anything. They said no. They said the records were being sealed for the child's protection. I hung up the phone and cried for 3 hours. I had to set the journal down. My grandmother had tried to get me. She'd wanted me, but the system had decided she wasn't good enough. The same way they decided so many things about my life without asking what I wanted. I picked up the journal again, my vision blurring with tears. The entries continued, growing more sporadic as the years passed. February 11th, 2007. Set up a trust today with the lawyer in town. Sold 15 acres on the East Edge. Got $35,000, more than I expected. Put the ranch and what's left into the trust. Designated for Maya Grace Carter if she ever comes looking. Trust will auto-pay property taxes from the fund every year. Already paid ahead 5 years from savings. After that, the trust takes over. Should last until 2027 at least. I don't know if she'll ever see this place, but if she does, at least she'll know she came from somewhere. That someone thought about her. March 15th, 2007. I've been writing letters to Maya. I don't know her address, so I send them to social services, asking them to forward them. They keep coming back. Return to sender. Address unknown. But I keep writing anyway. Maybe someday she'll read them. Maybe someday she'll know. The journal stopped in 2009. Eleanor had died. But there was something else in the trunk I hadn't noticed before. A shoebox tucked into the corner, held closed with a rubber band that crumbled when I touched it. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, all in the same handwriting. All addressed to me, care of various social services offices, and every single one had been stamped in red ink. Return to sender. Address unknown. I picked up the first one. The envelope was yellowed, the stamp faded. Postmarked September 23, 2005. I opened it with shaking hands. My dear Maya, you're only a few months old and I've never held you, but I think about you every single day. I want you to know that you were not thrown away. You were lost, and I'm trying so hard to find you. Your father made a mistake, but he loved you. I know he did, because I saw his face when he told me about you. Please know that somewhere in this world, there is a grandmother who loves you more than you can imagine. Happy first fall, little one. The leaves are changing here and I wish you could see them. All my love, your grandmother, Eleanor. I opened more, letter after letter, each one marking a milestone, each one an act of love. For your 6th birthday, I'm sending you a picture of the ranch. This is where you would have grown up if things had been different. The horses are gentle and the sunsets are beautiful. I hope wherever you are, someone is showing you beautiful things. For your 10th birthday, you're in double digits now. I bet you're tall and smart and brave. I bet you have your father's eyes, that deep brown that looks almost gold in certain light. I hope you are happy. I hope someone is making sure you are happy. The last letter was dated July 28th, 2009, 2 days before Eleanor died. My dear Maya, I'm not well. The doctor says my heart is giving out. But I had to write this letter because I need you to know, if I die before we meet, it wasn't because I stopped looking for you. I never stopped. I never will. Everything I have is yours. The ranch, the land, the trust fund. Mr. Blackwell at the law office has the paperwork. If you ever find this place, please know that you are loved. Every single day of your life, you were loved by someone you never met. Your grandmother, Eleanor. I counted the envelopes. 247 letters. 19 years of unanswered love. I was sobbing by the time I finished reading. 19 years of letters. 19 years of a woman I'd never met telling me she loved me, that she was looking for me, that I mattered. Eleanor had died alone in this house, surrounded by letters that had never reached me, still hoping that someday I would come. And I had. Too late to meet her, but not too late to know her. I gathered all the letters carefully and placed them back in the shoebox. Then I stood up and walked through the house again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just an abandoned building. This was my grandmother's hope made physical. Every repair she'd made, every tax payment she'd scraped together, every letter she'd written. It had all been for me. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a routine. I would wake up early and work on the house, scrubbing years of dust and grime, patching holes in the walls, replacing broken window panes with materials I bought on credit at the hardware store after Marlene vouched for me. The work was hard, but there was something satisfying about it. Every room I cleaned, every window I fixed felt like I was uncovering something precious. Under all that neglect was a home, solid and real, waiting to be brought back to life. Marlene stopped by a few times a week, bringing supplies and teaching me basic repairs. You dig the fence post hole 3 feet deep. Not 2, not 2.5, 3. Otherwise the winter frost'll push it right out. She showed me how to check the windmill mechanism, climbing up the ladder with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. She showed me how to tell if water lines were still functional, tracing the pipes with her hands and listening for the sounds that meant trouble. Her daughter Willa came with her sometimes. About 25, with the same practical demeanor as her mother, but a quicker smile. She taught me how to drive the old pickup after we got it running, with help from a mechanic in town. The first time I managed to shift gears without grinding, she cheered like I'd won an Olympic medal. Other neighbors appeared too. People whose names I struggled to remember at first. They'd heard Eleanor's granddaughter had come back, and they showed up with offers of help. Someone brought me a working refrigerator their family was replacing. Someone else dropped off a load of firewood for the stove. A woman named Delia, who'd apparently been friends with my grandmother for 30 years, came by with home-cooked meals twice a week, refusing to take no for an answer. Your grandmother fed half this town during the drought of '98, made casseroles for anyone who was struggling. This is just us returning the favor. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Then, on a Friday morning, 6 weeks after I'd arrived, everything changed. I was working on repairing the porch railing when I heard the rumble of an engine. A black SUV was coming up the road, its glossy paint and chrome wheels looking completely out of place against the dusty landscape. It stopped in front of the house, and 2 people got out. A man in his 50s wearing a vest that cost more than everything I owned combined, and a younger man in a suit carrying a leather briefcase. Their shoes were polished, their clothes pressed. They looked like they'd gotten lost on the way to a country club. The older man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the girl who's been staying here. I'm Victor Langford." He extended his hand. I didn't take it. "Who are you?" His smile tightened. "I'm a relative of the Carter family. My grandmother was a cousin of Theodore Carter, which makes me a distant relation to Eleanor and, well, to this property." He gestured at the ranch like he was showing it off at an auction. "I've been keeping an eye on this place for years, waiting to see if anyone would ever claim it. And now here you are." The younger man stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "Mr. Langford has documentation showing his connection to the Carter family. According to our research, Eleanor Carter expressed a desire for this property to remain with family members. Legitimate family members." He emphasized the word legitimate in a way that made my stomach turn. "Here's the thing, Miss Brooks, or Cartwright, or whatever you're calling yourself." Victor clasped his hands behind his back, rocking on his heels. "You show up out of nowhere with a key and a letter from someone who's been missing for almost 20 years. No birth certificate linking you to this family, no DNA test, nothing but a story." He shrugged like this was all very reasonable. "Now, I'm not saying you're lying. Maybe you really are Daniel's daughter, but maybe you're not. And until that's proven in a court of law, I'm afraid I'm going to have to challenge your claim to this property." My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "Eleanor left this ranch to me. There's a trust with my name on it." Victor nodded sympathetically. "Yes, a trust set up for Maya Grace Carter. But you are Maya Brooks. You have no documentation proving you are Maya Grace Carter. For all anyone knows, you read about this abandoned property somewhere and decided to help yourself." "That's not true." He held up his hands. "Maybe not. But a judge will have to decide that. And in the meantime, I suggest you think very carefully about whether you want to fight this battle. I have lawyers. I have resources." "You have what? A part-time job at a diner?" He'd done his research. I'd started helping Hank at the diner a few days a week to earn some cash. "You have 30 days to produce documentation proving your identity. If you cannot, I will file a lawsuit claiming this property as the rightful heir through the Carter family line. And I will win." He smiled that empty smile again. "Nothing personal, just business." They got back in their SUV and drove away, leaving me standing on the porch with my heart pounding and my head spinning. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything Victor had said. He was right about one thing. I had no proof. The letter from Daniel wasn't legally binding. The trust had my birth name on it, but my birth certificate said Maya Brooks. The foster care system had given me that name, and somewhere along the way my real identity had been buried in sealed records. The next morning I drove into town to see Howard Blackwell, the lawyer who'd set up Eleanor's trust. His office was above the bank, a small room crammed with filing cabinets and stacks of paper that looked like they'd been accumulating since the 70s. Howard was 72 years old, with white hair and thick glasses, but his mind was sharp. I remember when Eleanor came to me about that trust. She was determined, said she didn't care if it took 50 years. She wanted everything ready for when her granddaughter came home. He pulled out a folder from one of his filing cabinets. "The trust is solid, properly executed, properly funded. The problem is proving you are the beneficiary. Your birth records are sealed by the state. I've already made some calls, but getting those records unsealed could take months, maybe years. I don't have years. Victor Langford is giving me 30 days." Howard nodded grimly. "Victor Langford. That man has been circling this property like a vulture ever since Eleanor died. He's not even really related to the Carters, just some distant connection through Theodore's side of the family. But he has money and lawyers, and that counts for a lot in this world. What can I do? Howard leaned back in his chair. Find proof. Anything that connects you to Daniel and Eleanor. A photograph with identifying information, a medical record, something that a judge cannot ignore. Eleanor kept everything. If there's proof, it's probably still in that house somewhere. I spent the next week tearing the house apart, searching every drawer, every closet, every box. I found more photographs, more letters, more evidence of my grandmother's love. But nothing that would hold up in court. Nothing with my name and Daniel's name and proof that we were connected. And the community started to divide. Some people believed me, saw Eleanor in my stubbornness and Theodore in the shape of my jaw. But others were skeptical, whispering that I was just another city girl trying to take advantage of an old woman's estate. Victor had been spreading his version of events, buying drinks at the bar and telling anyone who would listen that I was probably a con artist. Iris at the hardware store stopped giving me credit. A few people who'd been friendly started avoiding eye contact when I came into town. It felt like the ground was shifting under my feet, like everything I'd started to build was crumbling. One night, 5 days before Victor's deadline, I sat on the porch as darkness settled over the land. I had no proof. The town was turning against me, and time was running out. Then I remembered something. A passage in Eleanor's journal I'd read weeks ago and forgotten. Something about Daniel hiding things when he was a boy. I ran inside and grabbed the journal, flipping through pages until I found it. August 12th, 1988. Found Daniel's treasure box under the barn floorboards again today. That boy thinks he's so clever. I let him keep his hiding spot. Under the barn floorboards. Headlights appeared on the road. A car moving slowly, stopping at the gate. Just sitting there, watching. Victor's black SUV. It stayed for 10 minutes, then drove away. But I knew where to look now. Tomorrow, I would search the barn. Tomorrow, I would find what Eleanor had hidden, what Daniel had hidden. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. The journal sat open on my lap, that single entry about Daniel's hiding spot burning into my mind. 4 in the morning found me pulling on boots and grabbing the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, my breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn cold. The barn loomed dark against the star-filled sky. No moon tonight, just the Milky Way stretched overhead like someone had spilled salt across black velvet. Eleanor used to look at these stars, used to stand in this exact spot and wonder where I was. The barn door groaned when I pushed it open. My flashlight beam cut through darkness thick with the smell of old hay and dust. I swept the light across the floor, looking for anything unusual. The wood was weathered, gray, split in places from decades of Montana winters. Then I saw it. A section near the back where the boards didn't quite match the rest. Newer wood, different color. Someone had replaced these planks, but not recently. Maybe 15, 20 years ago. I found a crowbar hanging on the wall and wedged it under the first board. The nails shrieked as they pulled free. My arms burned. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. 1 board. 2. 3. Underneath was a hole dug into the dirt floor, maybe 2 feet deep. And in the hole, wrapped in an old tarp, sat a metal box. Fireproof. The kind you'd use to protect important documents from disaster. My hand shook as I lifted it out. Heavy. Something substantial inside. The box had a combination lock on the front, 3 dials showing numbers 0 through 9. I tried Eleanor's birthday.
July 15th, 1932. 7:15. Nothing. Daniel's birthday, March 22nd, 1980. 3:22. Still locked. Then I remembered the date from the letters. May 17th, 2005. My birthday. The day I was born. 5:17. The lock clicked open. Inside was a manila envelope marked "For Maya" in Eleanor's careful handwriting. Below it, papers wrapped in plastic. I pulled everything out carefully, spreading it on the barn floor in the circle of flashlight.
A DNA test. Dated June 2006. Professional lab work from a place in Billings called Mountain States Genetics. The results showed samples from Subject A, labeled hair from infant female, and Subject B, labeled hair from Daniel Carter childhood belongings. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. A notary stamp at the bottom confirmed the chain of custody. Eleanor had done this right. Legal. Documented. Beneath the DNA test was an affidavit on heavy paper stock, notarized September 26, 2005. I, Daniel James Carter, hereby acknowledge that I am the biological father of Maya Grace Carter, born May 17, 2005, found at River Street Police Station. I left a blue towel and a lock of her hair with my mother, Eleanor Carter, before leaving town. I deeply regret not being able to raise my daughter, but I entrust her care and inheritance to my mother's judgment. Signed, Daniel Carter. Witnessed by Howard Blackwell, attorney at law. My throat tightened. Daniel had signed this, had acknowledged me, had left proof before he ran. But there was no birth certificate, nothing with Maya Grace Carter written on official government letterhead, just the DNA test and the affidavit. Would it be enough? The last item was another letter from Eleanor, the paper newer than the others, the ink still dark. My dear Maya, if you found this, you're holding proof. But I hid one more thing. Your original birth certificate, where Theodore and I used to watch sunsets together. Look where we scattered James's ashes, by the creek, under the old cottonwood. That's where you'll find the last piece. I knew if you were truly mine, you would find it when you needed it most. Always your grandmother, Eleanor. The cemetery. The birth certificate was buried at the cemetery. But before I could move, before I could plan my next step, the radio in the house crackled to life. I'd left it on overnight, some habit from the group home where silence felt dangerous. Now a voice cut through static with urgency. Blizzard warning in effect for Clearwater County and surrounding areas. Winter storm expected to bring 18 to 24 inches of snow and winds up to 60 miles per hour over the next 72 hours. This will be the worst storm to hit the region in 15 years. Residents are advised to stay indoors and avoid all travel. I looked out the barn door. The sky to the north had turned the color of old bruises. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last hour. A blizzard. Now, with 3 days left before Victor's deadline, I ran back to the house and started preparing. Eleanor's journal had entries about surviving winter storms. I'd read them all, never thinking I'd need the information. Now those words came back like instructions from the grave. Wood. I needed wood. The pile outside was already substantial from weeks of preparation, but I hauled more from the old shed, stacking it on the porch where I could reach it even if snow blocked the door. Trip after trip, arms aching, lungs burning in the increasingly cold air. Water. I filled every container I could find. Pots, buckets, the bathtub. If the pipes froze, I'd need a reserve. Food. I had canned goods, beans, soup, vegetables, enough for a week if I rationed carefully. The bread would go stale, but I could toast it over the wood stove. I sealed the windows with plastic sheeting, taping edges carefully to block drafts. Found candles and matches. Made sure the wood stove was clean and the flue open. Eleanor's journal said a clean flue was the difference between warmth and death by carbon monoxide. By noon, the first snowflakes were falling. By 3, the wind had picked up, pushing snow horizontal across the prairie. By 5, the world outside disappeared into white chaos. The power went out at 7. One moment, the overhead bulb was glowing. The next, just darkness and the howl of wind. I lit candles and fed the wood stove, watching orange light dance across the walls. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, I was completely alone. No neighbors within shouting distance, no phone service, no way to reach anyone if something went wrong. I pulled Eleanor's journal close and read by candlelight. December 18th, 1998. Worst blizzard since '78. Lost power for 3 days, but I kept the fire going and the animals safe. Theodore would be proud. Daniel called from town, worried about me. I told him I'm tougher than I look. That's what you have to be out here. Tough, stubborn, willing to endure. I smiled despite everything. Tougher than I look. Yeah, Grandma, I'm trying. The first night was bearable. Cold, but the stove kept the main room warm enough. I slept in my clothes on the couch, feeding the fire every few hours, waking to add logs before the temperature could drop too far. The second day was worse. The wind screamed like something alive, rattling windows, finding every crack in the walls. Snow piled against the house until I couldn't see out the windows anymore, just white pressing in from all sides. I melted snow for water, ate cold beans from a can, read more of the journal. March 4th, 1993. First winter without Theodore. Had to break ice on the water trough this morning. Fingers went numb. Came inside and cried, not from the cold but from the loneliness. This ranch is too big for one person. But I promised Theodore I'd keep it running. Promised I'd be here if Daniel ever came back. Some promises you keep even when they hurt. The words blurred. I wiped my eyes. Eleanor had done this alone for 16 years. 16 winters, 16 summers, working until her heart gave out, waiting for someone who never came. I would not let Victor take this away. The third night, 2 in the morning, I woke to a sound that wasn't wind. A cry, weak, coming from outside. I sat up, listening. There it was again, an animal in distress. The radio had been clear, do not go outside for any reason. People died in blizzards like this, froze to death 10 feet from their own front door because they couldn't see where they were going. But that sound, that desperate crying. I dressed in every layer I owned, 3 pairs of socks, 2 sweaters under my coat, wrapped a scarf around my face until only my eyes showed, put on gloves and the thick work gloves over those. Opening the door was like opening a portal to another world. The wind hit me with physical force, trying to shove me back inside. Snow so thick I couldn't see the porch railing 3 feet away. Temperature so cold, my exposed skin burned immediately. I tied a rope from the porch to my waist. Eleanor's journal had mentioned this trick. A lifeline. If I got disoriented, I could follow it back. The barn was 30 yards from the house. It took me 20 minutes to cover that distance. The snow was hip-deep in places. I fell twice, got back up, pushed forward. The crying sound got louder. Inside the barn, the wind noise dropped to a roar instead of a scream. I swept my flashlight across the interior. There, in the corner behind a stack of old hay bales, a calf, maybe a week old, separated from its mother somehow, taken by the storm. The animal lay on its side, barely moving.
Ice crusted its fur. When I touched it, the skin felt cold as stone. This calf was dying, would be dead by morning without intervention. I thought about leaving it, about going back to the house and the fire and the safety. I thought about how I had 3 days left to get to that cemetery, to find the birth certificate, to save everything Eleanor had left me.
But then I thought about what Eleanor would do. What she had done in the blizzard of '98 when she saved one of Marlene's calves. Some choices define who you are. Some moments test whether you have the spine to become who you need to be. I found old horse blankets in the tack room, wrapped the calf as best I could. The animal was heavy, 80 pounds of dead weight and ice. I couldn't carry it, had to drag it through the barn door, out into the storm, across 30 yards of hell. The wind tried to tear the calf from my grip. Snow pelted my face hard enough to sting even through the scarf. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, couldn't feel my feet. Just kept pulling, kept moving, following the rope back to the porch. Getting the calf up the steps was the hardest part. I fell on the 3rd step, the animal's weight pulling me down. Lay there for a moment in the snow, exhausted, wondering if I had the strength to finish this. Then I imagined Eleanor watching. Imagined her here in this exact spot, making the same choice, refusing to quit because quitting meant death for something helpless. I got up, hauled the calf the rest of the way, pulled it inside and slammed the door against the storm. The house felt like a sauna compared to outside. I couldn't stop shaking. My fingers were white, numb. I'd read about frostbite, knew I'd pushed my luck. But the calf, I had to focus on the calf. I dragged it right up to the wood stove, piled blankets on top of it, found a dropper in the kitchen and mixed warm water with a little sugar. Pried the animal's mouth open and squeezed drops onto its tongue. Come on, swallow, please swallow. Nothing at first, just shallow breathing, eyes closed. I kept at it, drop by drop, rubbing its legs to encourage circulation, talking to it. You're not dying tonight, not on my watch. You're going to live because I didn't drag you through that storm just to watch you quit. An hour passed. 2. The shaking in my hands finally stopped. Feeling came back to my fingers with needle-sharp pain. 3 hours. The calf's breathing got stronger. 4 hours. Its eyes opened. Brown and large and looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. 5 hours. It tried to stand, failed, tried again, made it up on wobbly legs that couldn't quite support its weight yet. I laughed. Actual laughter, the sound foreign in the empty house. You did it. We did it. The sun came up on the 4th day and the storm began to break. Wind still blowing, but visibility returning. I could see the barn again, could see the fence line in the distance. That's when I heard the engine. A tractor, the only vehicle that could move through snow this deep. It stopped outside and someone pounded on the door. Marlene stood on the porch covered in snow, eyes wide when she saw me. Maya, thank God. I've been checking on everyone, half the county's without power. Are you okay? I'm fine. She stepped inside and stopped. Stared at the calf standing next to the wood stove, still wrapped in blankets. That's one of mine. Got separated in the storm. I thought for sure she was dead. Her voice cracked. Your grandmother saved one of my calves the same way. Blizzard of '98. Spent all night keeping it alive in this barn. I was 25 and didn't know what the hell I was doing. Eleanor showed me what real ranching looked like.
Marlene put her hand on my shoulder, grip firm. You've got her in you, Maya. I don't care what any piece of paper says. You're Eleanor Carter's granddaughter. Anyone who says different can answer to me. The validation hit harder than expected. My eyes stung. Thank you. She helped me load the calf into her tractor, brought me a thermos of hot soup and a battery-powered radio. Storm's supposed to clear by tonight. Roads should be passable by tomorrow. You need anything else? I need to get to the cemetery as soon as the road's clear.
The cemetery? She frowned. Why? Because there's something there I need. Something that will prove who I am.
She didn't ask more questions, just nodded. I'll come get you tomorrow morning, first light. We'll make it happen. After she left, I stood in the doorway and looked at what the storm had done. Snow covered everything, drifts 6 feet high in places. The world transformed into something alien and beautiful and dangerous. But I'd survived it. Survived it and saved a life in the process. The same way Eleanor had done 40 years ago. Some things run deeper than blood, deeper than DNA tests and birth certificates. Some things live in the choices you make when nobody's watching and nothing forces your hand except your own conscience. Marlene came back at dawn the next morning, true to her word. The tractor had a plow blade on the front, cutting a path through snow still knee-deep in places.
I climbed in beside her, the metal box with the DNA test and affidavit wrapped in a tarp at my feet.
The cemetery was half a mile behind the ranch house, tucked into a hollow where cottonwood trees grew along a creek. The trees were old, their bare branches reaching toward a sky finally cleared of clouds. Marlene stayed with the tractor. I'll keep the engine running. You do what you need to do. I walked between headstones dusted with snow, found Eleanor's grave easily. The marker I'd placed weeks ago, granite with her name and dates carved deep. Next to her lay Theodore, and beside them, space for Daniel if he ever came back. If he ever stopped running. The old cottonwood tree stood at the edge of the cemetery, massive trunk gnarled with age. Eleanor's journal had mentioned it 100 times. The place she and Theodore used to sit. The place they'd scattered his ashes when he died. I knelt at the base of the tree and started digging.
The ground was frozen on top, but softer underneath. My hands went numb again. Dirt packed under my fingernails. I didn't care. 2 feet down, my fingers hit metal. Another box, smaller than the one from the barn, but the same fireproof design. This one wasn't locked, just latched shut against moisture. Inside was a single document in a plastic sleeve. Clearwater County Hospital. Certificate of live birth. Name of child, Maya Grace Carter. Date of birth, May 17, 2005. Mother, Jessica Marie Thompson, age 19, transient. Father, Daniel James Carter, age 25, Clearwater, Montana. My real birth certificate. The proof that Maya Grace Carter and Maya Brooks were the same person. Underneath the certificate was one more letter. My dear Maya, if you're reading this, you're standing where Theodore and I used to watch sunsets. We'd sit under this cottonwood for hours, talking about dreams and fears and all the things couples talk about when they're not afraid of silence. When he died, I scattered his ashes here. This ground is sacred to me. This is where love lives, even after death. I've hidden your birth certificate here, because this is where the most important things should be kept. The ranch is yours. This land is your inheritance. But more than that, my love is yours forever, whether I'm here to give it to you or not. Always your grandmother, Eleanor. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried.
not the desperate sobbing from finding the letters. This was different. This was grief and gratitude mixed together. Grief for never meeting the woman who loved me so much. Gratitude that she'd made sure I would know, would have proof, would never doubt that I mattered. I found it, Grandma. I have everything I need now. I can fight.
The wind rustled through the bare cottonwood branches, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice in it.
Good girl. Now go finish this. Marlene drove me back to the house. I showed her the birth certificate through the plastic sleeve. Her eyes widened. This is it. This is what you needed. She pulled out her phone, got 2 bars of signal, and called Howard's office. He answered on the second ring. Howard, it's Marlene. Maya found the evidence. Original birth certificate, DNA test, notarized affidavit. Everything Eleanor hid for her. Can you see us today? A pause while Howard responded. Good. We'll be there in an hour. Howard's office felt warm after the cold drive into town. He spread the documents across his desk carefully, examining each one with the meticulous attention of someone who understood what was at stake. The birth certificate is the key. This is an official county document showing your birth name as Maya Grace Carter.
Combined with the DNA test and Daniel's affidavit, this creates an unbreakable chain of evidence. He looked up at me over his glasses. Victor's going to claim these are forged, that you had time to manufacture evidence. Can he prove that? Howard shook his head. Not if we have expert testimony. The DNA test was conducted by Mountain States Genetics in Billings. I'll call them, see if anyone from 2006 is still on staff. If we can get someone to testify that the test is authentic, that the records exist in their files, Victor has nothing. He made the call right there. Spoke to someone named Dr. Catherine Brennan, head of the lab. I could only hear Howard's side of the conversation, but his expression grew more satisfied with each exchange. Dr. Brennan remembers the case. She personally conducted the test, still has her lab notes from 2006. She's willing to testify via video call at the hearing. Relief washed through me so strong I had to sit down. We have everything? We have everything. Court's the day after tomorrow, 9 in the morning. Marlene drove me back to the ranch in the late afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. She'd stood by me when half the town was whispering, had vouched for me, had become something close to family. When we reached the ranch, she grabbed my arm before I could get out. Maya, listen. Victor Langford is a bastard. He's been trying to get this property for years. When Eleanor died, he filed papers claiming he was a relative. The county rejected his claim. He's been waiting ever since for another chance. I looked at her. What are you saying? I'm saying he's desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. You should stay with me tonight, with Willa and me, just until the hearing. I can't leave. What if he comes back? Then you shouldn't be alone. I thought about it. About Victor's SUV, sitting at the gate 3 nights ago, just watching. About how he'd researched me, knew where I worked, knew I had nothing. But this was my home, Eleanor's home. I wasn't going to be scared out of it. I'll be fine. I have your number. If anything happens, I'll call. Marlene looked unhappy, but nodded. Keep your phone charged. And Maya, lock the doors. I watched her tractor disappear down the road, red taillights fading into dusk. Then I went inside and did exactly what she said. Locked both doors, checked the windows, put the metal box with all the evidence on the kitchen table where I could see it. That night I couldn't sleep. Too much adrenaline, too much anticipation. Court in 36 hours. Everything decided then. I'd either prove who I was or lose everything. I sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's letters spread around me. 247 messages of love that had never reached their destination. Each one a testament to persistence, to hoping when hope seemed foolish, to believing in something you'd never seen. Around midnight, I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. I turned off the lights and moved to the window. Victor's SUV idling at the gate, engine running, headlights on, just sitting there. He didn't get out, didn't approach the house, just sat there for 10 minutes while my heart hammered and my hands gripped the window frame hard enough to hurt. Psychological warfare, trying to rattle me, make me scared. It was working. Finally, the SUV drove away. I stood there in the dark for another hour, watching the road, making sure he didn't come back. At 3 a.m, I finally went to bed, fell into fitful sleep filled with dreams of courtrooms and fires and letters burning to ash. I woke at 8 to pounding on the door, bolted upright, heart racing, expecting Victor. But it was Willa, Marlene's daughter. She held a paper bag that smelled like fresh bread. Mom sent breakfast. And I'm supposed to stay with you until court tomorrow. She's worried about Victor. I let her in, grateful for the company. We ate together in the kitchen, talking about nothing important. The weather, the calf that had survived, the spring planting Marlene was planning. Around noon, Willa went to check the barn while I reviewed the documents one more time, making sure everything was perfect, making sure I hadn't missed anything. That's when I noticed the truck. Not Victor's SUV. A different vehicle, older, parked way down the road near the gate. I watched it for 15 minutes. It didn't move. Willa came back from the barn. I pointed at the truck. You see that? She squinted. Yeah, that's Jake Morrison's truck. Works night shift at the packaging plant. Why's he out here? I don't know. Her face went serious. Stay inside. I'm going to go talk to him. She climbed into her own pickup and drove down to the gate. I watched through binoculars I'd found in Eleanor's closet. Watched Willa get out. Walked to Jake's truck. They talked for a minute, then she came back. Jake saw a black SUV leave here at 3:15 this morning. Said he was driving home from work and passed it on the road. Thought it was weird at the time because nobody lives out this way except you and us. 3:15. Right after Victor's little intimidation show at the gate. Where was Victor going at 3:15 in the morning? Willa's expression darkened. Maya, did you check the barn? Check everything? We ran outside together. The barn looked fine. The windmill, fine. The outbuildings, fine. Everything covered in melting snow but undamaged. Then I smelled it. Faint. Acrid. Chemical. I followed the scent around to the back of the house, to the crawl space entrance under the kitchen. The lock had been cut. The small door hung open. Willa grabbed my arm. Get away from there, now! We backed up. She pulled out her phone and called her mother, then the sheriff, then the fire department. I stood there shaking, not from cold, but from understanding what I was looking at. Someone had been under my house. 3 hours after Victor's SUV had sat watching, 3 hours before I would have woken up. The sheriff arrived first, older man with a weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanor. He went into the crawl space with a flashlight, spent 5 minutes down there, came back out with his jaw set. Accelerant. Gasoline. Poured on the floor joists under your kitchen. Rags stuffed in there ready to light. If someone had lit this, the whole house would have gone up in minutes. My legs went weak. Willa caught my arm, held me upright. When was the last time you checked this crawl space?
I never have. Didn't even know it was here. The lock's been cut recently. Metal's still bright. He looked at me hard. You have any idea who might want to burn down your house? I told him about Victor.
About the property dispute. About the SUV at the gate. About Jake Morrison seeing it leave at 3:15. The sheriff's expression went from concerned to angry. Victor Langford. Should have known. He pulled out his radio. I need deputies out at the Langford property, now. And I want to talk to Jake Morrison. Things moved fast after that. Deputies arrived, crime scene tape went up, photographs taken, the rags and gasoline collected as evidence. By evening, Victor was in custody, arrested for attempted arson. Jake Morrison's testimony put his vehicle at the scene. The sheriff's investigation found Victor's fingerprints on the cut lock. Howard called me around 6. Maya, I just heard. Are you okay? I'm fine. The house is fine. They found it before anything happened. There was a pause on the line. This changes everything. Victor just committed a felony, attempted arson. The judge is going to know about this before the hearing tomorrow. And Maya? I'm filing an emergency motion to have Victor's claim dismissed based on criminal intimidation. We're going to win this. Not just win. We're going to bury him. That night, Willa insisted I stay at her place. I packed a bag with the metal box of evidence and the letters, left the house dark and locked, and tried not to think about how close I'd come to losing everything. If Jake Morrison hadn't been driving home from work at 3:15 in the morning, if he hadn't seen Victor's SUV, if Willa hadn't made me check the crawl space. I lay awake in Willa's guest room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how Eleanor had survived alone for 16 years, how she'd faced down threats I couldn't imagine, how she'd persisted when persistence seemed impossible. Tomorrow I would walk into that courtroom and prove I was her granddaughter, prove I deserved what she'd left me, prove that love meant something. Victor had tried to burn me out, had tried to destroy the evidence, and me with it. He'd failed. And tomorrow, in front of the whole town, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. The sun came up on the day of the hearing. I dressed carefully in the only nice clothes I owned, a simple dress I'd bought at the thrift store in town, pulled my hair back, made sure the metal box was secure. Marlene and Willa drove me to the courthouse at 8:30. The building was small, red brick, probably built in the 50s. A crowd had already gathered outside. Hank from the diner, Delia who'd brought me casseroles, Iris from the hardware store looking ashamed. Dozens of other faces, some friendly, some neutral, all curious. Howard met me at the door. Are you ready? I held up the metal box. I have everything Eleanor left me, everything she wanted me to have. I'm ready. We walked into the courtroom together. The room filled behind us. Victor sat at the defendant's table in handcuffs, flanked by 2 deputies. His expensive lawyers looked nervous. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The bailiff called the court to order, and I placed my hand on the metal box and prepared to fight for my inheritance. For love that had traveled nowhere but meant everything. For a grandmother who'd loved me without ever holding me. For a home I'd found when I'd stopped looking. The judge's gavel came down and I took a breath that felt like my first real breath in 19 years. My name is Maya Grace Carter, and I'm here to prove it. Judge Margaret Sullivan looked exactly like someone who'd spent 40 years listening to people lie. Silver hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain, expression that gave away nothing. She settled into her chair and surveyed the packed courtroom. I'm aware this case has generated significant community interest. However, I expect decorum. Anyone disrupting these proceedings will be removed. Her gaze landed on Victor.
still in handcuffs. "Mr. Langford, I've been briefed on your arrest last night. We'll address those charges separately. For now, we're here to determine the validity of the Eleanor Carter Trust and whether Miss Brooks has standing to claim it." Victor's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, before we begin, I must object to the timing of Mr. Langford's arrest. It appears designed to prejudice this court against my client." Judge Sullivan's eyebrow lifted half an inch. "Counselor, your client was arrested because the sheriff found gasoline-soaked rags under Miss Brooks's house and a witness placing his vehicle at the scene. The timing is unfortunate for you, not suspicious. Objection denied. Present your case." The lawyer's jaw tightened. He turned to face the courtroom like he was performing for an audience. "Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Victor Langford is a documented descendant of the Carter family through Theodore Carter's cousin.
He has maintained interest in the family property for years. Meanwhile, this young woman appears from nowhere with a convenient story and questionable documentation." He gestured at me without looking. "She claims to be Maya Grace Carter, granddaughter of Eleanor Carter. Yet she has spent her entire life as Maya Brooks. She has no relationship with this community, no history here. She arrives with a key and a letter that could have been written by anyone." Howard started to rise, but the judge waved him down. "Save it for your turn, Mr. Blackwell." Victor's attorney continued. "Eleanor Carter was an elderly woman, isolated, possibly vulnerable to manipulation. We cannot know what communication she may have had with opportunists who learned of her situation. The trust document itself may be valid, but that does not prove this particular individual is the rightful beneficiary. Without irrefutable documentation, this claim should be dismissed and the property rightfully distributed to verified family members." He sat down with a satisfied expression, like he'd just won. Judge Sullivan looked at me over her glasses. "Miss Brooks, or Miss Carter, whichever you prefer, do you have documentation supporting your claim?" I stood. Howard had coached me on this. Stand straight, speak clearly, don't let them see you shake. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Howard rose beside me. "Your Honor, may I present evidence on Miss Carter's behalf?" "Proceed." Howard approached the bench with the metal box. I'd watched him organize everything this morning, each document in its own protective sleeve, each piece of evidence carefully ordered to tell a story. "Your Honor, I've known the Carter family for 45 years. I drafted Theodore Carter's will in 1992. I created Eleanor Carter's trust in 2007. I was present when Eleanor made the decision to leave everything to her granddaughter, and I witnessed her determination to ensure Maya would receive her inheritance, even if it took decades." He placed the first document on the judge's desk. "This is a DNA test conducted in June 2006 by Mountain States Genetics in Billings. The test compared a hair sample from an infant female with a hair sample from Daniel Carter's childhood belongings. The probability of paternity is 99.9%. The chain of custody was properly documented and notarized." Judge Sullivan examined it closely. "Who ordered this test?" "Eleanor Carter. She brought the samples to the lab herself. She kept the results in a fireproof container hidden on her property, along with other documents she wanted preserved." Howard placed the second document down. "This is a notarized affidavit from Daniel James Carter, dated September 2005, acknowledging paternity of Maya Grace Carter and confirming he left evidence of her identity with his mother before he departed Clearwater." The third document. "This is the original birth certificate from Clearwater County Hospital, showing Maya Grace Carter, born May 17, 2005, to Father Daniel James Carter. Eleanor hid this at the cemetery where she scattered her husband's ashes, along with a letter explaining its location. And how did Miss Carter locate these documents? Howard glanced at me. Eleanor left clues. She wrote about Daniel's childhood hiding spots in her ranch journal. She left a letter in the first hidden box directing Maya to the cemetery. Eleanor designed a treasure hunt for the granddaughter she hoped would someday come home. The judge leaned back, processing. These documents, if authentic, would establish a clear lineage. However, Mr. Langford's attorney raises a valid concern about authenticity. How do we verify these weren't fabricated? Howard pulled out his phone. Your Honor, I have Dr. Catherine Brennan from Mountain States Genetics standing by via video call. She personally conducted the DNA test in 2006 and still has her original lab notes. With your permission, I'd like her to testify. The bailiff set up a screen. A moment later, Dr. Brennan appeared. She looked about 50, red hair going gray, professional demeanor. She raised her right hand and was sworn in remotely. Dr. Brennan, please state your qualifications. I have a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Washington. I've been the director of Mountain States Genetics for 18 years. I've conducted over 10,000 paternity tests during my career. And do you recognize this DNA test report? She studied the document Howard held up to the camera. Yes, that's one of mine. I remember this case specifically because of the unusual circumstances. An elderly woman came to my lab with 2 hair samples, one from an infant's blue towel, one from a baby book belonging to her adult son. She explained that her son had a child who was placed in foster care, and she wanted proof of the relationship. Why do you remember it specifically? Because she cried in my office. She said this might be her only chance to leave something for her granddaughter. She asked me to be meticulous with the documentation because it might end up in court someday. I took extra care with the chain of custody as a result. Do you still have records from that test? Yes. We maintain all files for 25 years minimum. I pulled them this morning. The samples were logged, processed, and stored according to protocol. The results are legitimate. Victor's attorney stood. Dr. Brennan, how can you be certain the samples weren't contaminated or switched? Because I personally conducted every step of the analysis. I don't typically handle tests directly anymore, but Eleanor Carter asked me to. She was insistent. I have photographs of the samples, the extraction process, and the results. I have my handwritten notes. This test is as solid as any I've ever done. The attorney sat down looking unhappy. Judge Sullivan studied Dr. Brennan through the screen. Thank you, doctor. Your testimony is noted. You may disconnect. The screen went dark. Howard returned to our table and squeezed my shoulder. That went well. The judge shuffled papers. Mr. Blackwell, do you have additional evidence? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call witnesses from the community who knew Eleanor Carter and can speak to her intentions. Proceed, but be mindful of time. I don't need 20 people saying the same thing. Howard nodded. Hank Thornton, please come forward. Hank stood from the gallery, moving slowly, like this was the last place he wanted to be. But he'd come. They'd all come. Mr. Thornton, how long have you lived in Clearwater? My whole life, 62 years. And you knew Eleanor Carter? Yes, sir. She ate breakfast at my diner every Sunday morning for 30 years. Same booth, same order. Black coffee and wheat toast. What did you talk about? Life, weather, ranching. Her husband after he passed. Her son after he left. His voice softened. And her granddaughter. Eleanor started coming to my diner in the late 70s. When Daniel was young, she'd talk about his future. When Theodore died, she'd talk about the loneliness. But from the day Daniel left with that baby out there somewhere, Eleanor talked about finding Maya. Every Sunday for the next 4 years until she died,
she'd tell me about letters that came back unopened, about hoping someday her granddaughter would come home. How often did she mention this? Without fail.
Eleanor was obsessed with the idea that Maya was growing up believing nobody wanted her. She'd say, "Hank, I have to keep trying. What if she thinks I forgot? What if she never knows someone was looking?" When Miss Carter arrived in Clearwater, did you believe her claim? Hank looked directly at me. I didn't have to believe it. I could see it. She has Eleanor's eyes. Same way of holding her chin up when she's scared. Same stubborn refusal to quit. Eleanor would talk about her granddaughter like she knew her, even though they'd never met. And I'll be damned if she wasn't describing this girl right here. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Victor's attorney waved dismissively. Your Honor, emotional testimony about resemblance is hardly evidence. The judge gave him a flat look. Noted. Continue, Mr. Blackwell. I call Marlene Blackwood. Marlene walked to the stand like she was walking into a fight she planned to win. Weathered hands folded calmly in her lap, eyes hard. Mrs. Blackwood, you ranch near the Carter property? 10 miles south, been there 28 years. You knew Eleanor Carter? Eleanor was my mentor. When I bought my ranch, I didn't know a thing about cattle. My husband had died, and I was trying to raise a daughter alone and make a go of it. Eleanor showed up one day with tools and knowledge. Taught me everything. Never asked for payment. Just helped, because that's what neighbors do. Did she ever discuss her granddaughter? All the time. She'd say, Marlene, when Maya comes home, I want this place to be worth something. I want her to have options, to build a life. Eleanor sold 15 acres of good land to fund that trust. Those were acres she'd planned to use for winter grazing. She sacrificed her own operation to make sure her granddaughter would be taken care of. Marlene's gaze moved to me. 2 weeks ago, we had the worst blizzard in 15 years. Maya saved one of my calves, spent all night keeping it alive in Eleanor's barn. The exact same way Eleanor saved one of my calves in '98. Nobody told her to do it. She just did what came naturally. Her voice strengthened, because that's what Carters do. They show up when it matters. They don't quit when things get hard. Maya's got Eleanor in every bone of her body. I don't need a DNA test to tell me what I can see with my own eyes. The courtroom was silent when Marlene returned to her seat. Judge Sullivan's expression remained neutral, but something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Howard called Delia Ashworth next. The older woman moved carefully, arthritis making each step deliberate. Mrs. Ashworth, what was your relationship to Eleanor Carter? She was my best friend for 30 years. We met at church in '79, stayed close until she died. Did Eleanor discuss her granddaughter with you? Delia's eyes filled. She showed me every letter she wrote. Hundreds of them. We'd sit at her kitchen table and she'd read them to me before mailing them. She'd say, Delia, I know Maya won't get this. They keep sending them back, but I can't stop writing. What if she thinks I forgot her? What if she grows up believing nobody wanted her? Her voice broke. Eleanor made me promise something before she died. If Maya ever came to Clearwater, I was supposed to tell her the truth, that she was wanted, that she was loved, that Eleanor looked for her every single day. Delia looked at the judge. I'm keeping that promise right now, Your Honor. This girl is Eleanor's granddaughter, and anyone who says different is calling my best friend a liar. More witnesses followed. The mechanic who'd helped fix the ranch truck, Iris from the hardware store, apologizing for doubting me. A rancher who'd bought cattle from Eleanor in the '90s and remembered her talking about the granddaughter she'd lost. Then something unexpected happened. People started standing without being called. One by one throughout the courtroom, silent testimony. Willa rose first, then others. The woman from the feed store, the man who'd brought firewood. 12 people, 24, until half the courtroom was on their feet. Judge Sullivan watched without speaking. When everyone had settled, she turned to Victor's attorney. "Counselor, do you have witnesses?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We have character references for Mr. Langford, business associates who can speak to his integrity." "From Billings?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's expression said what her words didn't. People who'd driven 4 hours from the city to vouch for Victor versus an entire town standing up for me. "I think we've heard sufficient testimony on that point. Let's discuss the criminal charges. Sheriff Davis, you're present?" The sheriff stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Please summarize last night's events." The sheriff outlined everything.
Jake Morrison's testimony about seeing Victor's SUV leave the ranch at 3:15 in the morning. The cut lock on the crawlspace. The gasoline-soaked rags placed strategically under the kitchen floor. Victor's fingerprints on the lock mechanism. Your Honor, if someone had lit those rags, the house would have gone up fast. Anyone inside would have had maybe 2 minutes to get out. This wasn't vandalism. This was attempted murder. Victor's attorney jumped up. "Objection! That's inflammatory and purely speculative." "Is it?" The sheriff's tone went hard. "Your client is facing a property dispute. The night before the hearing, someone tries to burn down the property and potentially kill the claimant. You think that's coincidence?" Judge Sullivan held up her hand. "That's enough. Mr. Langford will face separate criminal proceedings for the arson attempt. For now, I'm ready to rule on the trust dispute." She removed her glasses and looked at Victor for a long moment. "Mr. Langford, I've reviewed your claim to the Carter property. Your connection to Theodore Carter is legitimate, but distant. Theodore's second cousin twice removed. You never visited Eleanor while she was alive. You showed no interest in the property until after her death. Your claim is legally valid, but morally hollow." Her attention shifted to me. "Miss Carter, the evidence you've presented is compelling. The DNA test is legitimate. The birth certificate is authentic. The affidavit is properly notarized. More importantly, the testimony from this community paints a clear picture of Eleanor Carter's intentions. She wanted you to have this property. She spent 14 years preparing for your arrival." Judge Sullivan put her glasses back on. "The trust established by Eleanor Carter is valid. The beneficiary is clearly identified as Maya Grace Carter. The documentation proves that Maya Brooks and Maya Grace Carter are the same person. Therefore, I rule that the property known as Carter Ranch, including all 40 acres and structures, belongs to Maya Grace Carter." Relief hit me like a physical force. My knees went weak. Howard gripped my arm. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "given that Mr. Langford's actions led to damage and trauma, I'm awarding Miss Carter $75,000 in compensatory damages for Mr. Langford's assets. This will help rebuild what was nearly destroyed." She looked at Victor. "And Mr. Langford, you should know that I'm referring your conduct to the district attorney. Fraud, forgery, attempted arson. You came into my courtroom expecting to steal property from a 19-year-old orphan. Instead, you'll be facing felony charges." The gavel came down. "Case dismissed. Miss Carter, the property is yours. Use it well." The courtroom erupted. Applause, cheers. Marlene hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. Hank was wiping his eyes with a napkin. Delia sobbed openly. Howard shook my hand with both of his. "Eleanor would have loved this. She always said you'd come home. She always believed."
I couldn't speak, could only stand there overwhelmed by the noise and the joy and the validation of 50 people who'd chosen to believe in me. Victor was let out in handcuffs, still protesting. His lawyers gathered their materials in defeated silence. The courtroom slowly emptied, people stopping to congratulate me on their way out. When the room finally cleared, I sat alone in the gallery for a moment, looked at the empty judge's bench, the witness stand where people had spoken truth about a woman I'd never met but who'd shaped my entire existence. Eleanor had written letters for 19 years, had fought the system trying to find me, had set up a trust, paid taxes in advance, hid evidence in multiple locations. All because she believed that someday, somehow, I'd find my way home. That evening, Hank threw together an impromptu celebration at the diner.
He closed to regular customers and opened just for what he called the Eleanor Carter Memorial Party. Tables pushed together, food appearing from nowhere. Someone brought a cake with "Welcome Home, Maya Carter" written in blue frosting. I sat at the center of it all, still processing. People kept coming up to shake my hand, to tell me stories about Eleanor, to welcome me to Clearwater officially.
"The ranch is yours now." Hank set a plate in front of me that I hadn't ordered. "You get to decide what comes next, what kind of life you want to build." I looked around the diner, at Marlene and Willa laughing together, at Delia telling a story that involved wild gestures, at Iris apologizing again, saying she'd give me credit whenever I needed it, at a dozen other faces that had gone from skeptical to supportive. "I want to stay." The words came out before I'd consciously decided. "I want to make this work. Keep the ranch running. Learn everything Eleanor knew." Hank smiled.
"Then you'll need help. Lucky for you, this town's full of people who want to teach you." Willa came over and sat down. "Mom says you should start small. Maybe a dozen head of cattle this year. Get comfortable with the basics before expanding." The mechanic, whose name I'd learned was Ray, suggested I replace the ranch truck's transmission before winter. "I'll do the labor if you cover parts." Iris offered to extend my credit line. "I was wrong to doubt you. Let me make it right." The evening stretched on, stories and laughter and plans for the future. For the first time in 19 years, I wasn't looking at people and wondering when they'd leave me. I was looking at people who'd chosen to stay. Around 9, Delia pulled me aside. She pressed something into my hand, a small wooden box. "Eleanor gave me this before she died. Made me promise to give it to you when you came home." Inside was a ring, simple silver band with 3 small stones. Eleanor's wedding ring. She wanted you to have it. Wanted you to know that you come from people who loved deeply and stayed faithful. Theodore gave her this ring in 1952. She wore it every day until she died. I slipped it onto my finger. Perfect fit. The party wound down around 11. People left in groups, calling goodbyes. Marlene insisted I stay at her place again until the crawl space could be properly secured. We drove back through darkness, the ranch a shadow against stars. Time did what time does. Moved forward whether you're ready or not. 6 months passed. By late summer, the ranch had transformed. The house got repaired, the crawl space secured with a new lock that took 2 keys to open. I used some of the settlement money to replace rotting boards and update the electrical. Kept Eleanor's furniture. Kept her quilts. Framed several of her letters and hung them in the living room where I could see them every day. Victor went to prison. 5 years for attempted arson. His lawyers tried to appeal, but the evidence was overwhelming. His property got sold to cover my settlement and his legal fees. I heard he was transferred to a facility in Wyoming. Heard he spent most of his time in the law library, still trying to find some angle to overturn the ruling.
he'd spend the rest of his life failing. The ranch itself came back to life slowly. I bought 12 head of cattle that spring, lost one to sickness, but 11 survived. Learned to recognize each animal by sight, named them all, which Marlene said was a mistake. You don't name things you might have to sell. But I did it anyway. Planted a garden behind the house. Tomatoes, beans, squash. Everything Eleanor's journal said grew well here. Watched things grow from seed to plant to harvest. Understood for the first time what it meant to work with seasons instead of against them. The community absorbed me like I'd always been there. I joined Delia's church even though I wasn't sure about God.
Went to town meetings and listened to debates about zoning and water rights.
Helped Marlene with branding her cattle, doing the job badly, but learning with each attempt. Hank added Maya's ranch breakfast to his permanent menu. 2 eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast. Served with a side of stubbornness, the description read. He charged $8 and gave me the first plate free every time I came in. October arrived with cool mornings and leaves turning on the cottonwood by the cemetery. I was fixing the barn door when I heard an engine. Old truck, beat up, Montana plates but not local. It pulled up slowly and stopped near the house. For a moment, nobody got out. Then the driver's door opened. The man who emerged looked like he'd been aged in a kiln. Mid-40s, but appearing older. Gray threading through brown hair. Deep lines carved into his face like rivers on a map. Clothes clean but worn. Boots that had walked hard miles.
He stood by the truck, staring at the house like seeing a ghost. Then his eyes found me, and something broke in his expression. His voice, when he finally spoke, was rough, unused. "You're Maya." I set down the hammer I'd been holding. "Yeah, I'm Daniel. I'm your father." The words I'd imagined 1,000 times. Practiced responses, rehearsed speeches about abandonment and choices and consequences, all of it evaporated. He looked old, looked broken, looked like life had taken him apart and barely bothered putting him back together. I saw the news about the court case. There was an article online, some piece about a teenager winning a ranch dispute in Montana. I saw your picture and I knew. You look just like my mother. He wiped his face with shaking hands. I've been driving for 3 days, trying to figure out what to say, trying to find words that make sense of what I did. But there aren't any. There's nothing I can say that makes up for leaving you. For running when you needed me most. Why did you come back? Because I'm a coward who finally got tired of running. Because I saw what you did and realized you're braver at 19 than I've ever been. Because my mother spent years looking for you, and I spent years pretending you didn't exist. Because I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. He turned toward the truck. I shouldn't have come. I just needed you to know that I think about you, that I'm proud of you, that I failed you in every way that matters. Wait, he stopped. I thought about Eleanor's letters, about how she'd written for 19 years to someone who never responded, about persistence, about believing in redemption, even when redemption seemed impossible. I don't know if I can forgive you. The words came out harder than intended. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I spent 19 years wondering where I came from, wondering if anyone out there remembered I existed. I walked down the porch steps. Eleanor never stopped looking for me. She wrote letters every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone for 4 years until she died. She believed in second chances, even when second chances seemed foolish. Daniel's eyes were wet.
She was always better than me, better than I deserved. There's a cabin on the back of the property, past the barn, half-mile down the creek. It's not much, needs work, but it's habitable. His face showed confusion. What are you saying? I'm saying if you want to stay, you can. Help with the ranch. Earn your place here. Maybe over time I can get to know you. Not as the father who left, but as the person you are now. You'd do that? After everything? I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. And for Eleanor. She believed in giving people chances they didn't deserve. Maybe I need to learn that lesson. Pause. But understand something. I'm not your little girl looking for her daddy. I'm Maya Carter, owner of this ranch. If you stay, you work. You earn my respect. You prove you're different than you were 20 years ago. Daniel nodded slowly, comprehension dawning. I won't let you down. Not again. We'll see. The cabin's that way. Get settled. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He climbed back in his truck and drove around toward the back property. I watched until he disappeared behind the barn. Then I walked to the cemetery, to Eleanor's grave where wildflowers bloomed and the cottonwood provided shade. I knelt on the grass and placed my hand on the granite. He came back, Grandma. Daniel came back. I don't know what will happen, but I'm going to try. Because that's what you would have done. The wind moved through the cottonwood branches, rustling leaves that would fall soon and return next spring. I did it. I found the letters. I saved the ranch. And I'm home. I stayed until the sun dropped toward the mountains, until long shadows stretched across Eleanor's grave and Theodore's beside it. Until the day's warmth faded and evening chill set in. Then I walked back to the house. My house. Eleanor's house. The house that had waited 19 years for someone to come home. Daniel's truck was parked by the cabin, smoke rising from the chimney. He'd started a fire. Would sleep there tonight, and tomorrow we'd see if rebuilding was possible. I went inside and made dinner. Simple food. Beans and cornbread from Eleanor's recipe book. Ate at the kitchen table where she'd eaten thousands of meals alone. The letters watched from their frames on the wall. Testaments to love that persists. To hope that endures. To faith that someday, somehow, the lost would find their way home. I woke before dawn the next morning. Habit now. Fed the horses. Checked the cattle. Found Daniel already up, splitting wood by the cabin. He waved awkwardly. I waved back. We didn't talk much those first weeks. Just worked. He fixed the corral rails I'd been struggling with.
I showed him where tools were stored. We ate dinner separately. Moved around each other like strangers learning to share space. Slowly, carefully, something began to build. Not forgiveness, not yet. But understanding, maybe. He told me about the 19 years he'd been gone, the guilt that followed him like a shadow, the jobs he'd worked and lost, the times he'd almost come back and convinced himself I was better off without him. I told him about group homes and foster families, about being the kid nobody wanted, about finding the key and the letters and this place that had been waiting. One evening, a month after he arrived, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. He spoke without looking at me. Your grandmother used to sit here every night. She'd have a cup of coffee and just watch the sky change colors. She said it reminded her that beautiful things happen even when you're not watching for them. Did she talk about me? Every day. Every single day for 4 years until she died.
He wiped his eyes. She'd say, Daniel, Maya's out there getting bigger,
learning to walk, learning to talk, going to school. And she doesn't know we exist. Doesn't know someone's thinking about her. It killed her. Killed me too, knowing I'd caused it. Why didn't you come back sooner? Because I'm weak. Because I told myself lies about you being better off. Because facing what I'd done was harder than running from it. He finally looked at me. But you're not weak. You're everything I should have been. Everything my mother hoped you'd be. We sat in silence as stars appeared. Not comfortable yet, but not hostile either. Just two people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without destroying each other. 3 months after Daniel arrived, Marlene invited us both to Sunday dinner, her way of signaling to the town that she approved of his presence. We drove over together in awkward silence. Willa answered the door and hugged me like always.
Then she looked at Daniel and extended her hand.
I'm Willa. I helped Maya save a calf in the blizzard. Your mother would have been proud of her. Daniel shook her hand, voice thick. I'm sure she would have been. The dinner was easier than expected. Marlene kept conversation flowing, asked Daniel about his work on the ranch, included him without making a show of it. By the time dessert arrived, some of the tension had eased. Driving home, Daniel spoke quietly. Thank you for letting me be part of this. Part of your life here. You're not part of my life yet. You're someone working on my ranch who happens to be related to me. But maybe someday you'll be more than that. Fair enough? It was the most honest conversation we'd had. Spring arrived again, the second spring since I'd come to Clearwater. The cattle herd grew to 20 head. The garden produced more than I could eat. Daniel proved reliable, showed up every day, did the work without being asked.
Slowly earned the respect of neighbors who remembered him as the kid who'd run away. One April morning, I found him at Eleanor's grave. He was pulling weeds from around the headstone, clearing away winter debris. I used to come here before I left, talk to my dad, ask him what to do. He never answered, of course, but it helped to say the words out loud. What did you ask him? How to be a father when I didn't know how to be a man. How to take care of a baby when I could barely take care of myself. He sat back on his heels. I never got good answers, so I ran. Told myself you'd have a better chance with someone else. Told myself I was doing you a favor. He looked at Eleanor's headstone. But Mom knew better. She knew running just makes the guilt follow you. She knew the only way to fix things is to face them, no matter how hard that is. You're facing them now, 20 years too late. Better late than never. I knelt beside him. Eleanor believed in second chances. She gave me one by leaving this place. Maybe I'm giving you one by letting you stay. We finished clearing the grave together, planted new wildflowers, stood side by side looking at the names carved in granite. I'm not going to call you Dad, at least not yet. But maybe someday. He nodded. I don't deserve it, but I'll try to earn it. I stood on the porch one evening in July, watching the sun set exactly the way Eleanor used to. Daniel was by the barn, finishing the day's work. Marlene's truck was coming up the road for dinner. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. This was what Eleanor had wanted. Not just property transferred, not just inheritance claimed, but a life built, a home created, connection forged where there'd been none. I thought about the girl who'd left Pinewood Girls' Home with $337 and no plan, who'd believed nobody wanted her, who'd been wrong about everything that mattered. Eleanor had wanted me every single day, Had written letters proving it.
had built a life raft out of land and money and hope, then launched it into the future, trusting it would reach me. And it had, against odds that should have been impossible. Through sealed records and bureaucratic indifference and 19 years of silence, love had persisted, had endured, had brought me home. I touched the ring on my finger, Eleanor's ring, proof that I came from people who loved deeply and stayed faithful. Marlene's truck pulled up. She got out with Willa, both carrying dishes for dinner. Daniel came from the barn, cleaned up and ready to join us. We gathered around the table Eleanor used to sit at alone, filled the room with laughter and conversation and life. Later, after everyone had left and Daniel had gone back to his cabin, I walked one more time to the cemetery to tell Eleanor about the day, about Daniel slowly becoming someone worth knowing, about the ranch thriving,
About feeling, for the first time in my life, like I belonged somewhere completely. You did this. I pressed my hand to the cold granite. You never stopped believing I'd come home. And I did. The wind answered with that familiar rustling, the cottonwood branches moving, the grass bending, the sound of Montana at peace. I'm Maya Grace Carter, rancher, granddaughter, keeper of a promise made across years by a woman who refused to stop loving. And this, finally, is home.